The judge slammed her gavel. "Final warning! Speak up or you'll be held in contempt of court." The old man slowly raised his head, leaned forward, and whispered 5 words that ended her career and reminded the entire courtroom what real authority sounds like. Welcome to Hidden Hero Stories. Before we begin this powerful story of silence, honor, and forgotten legend, tell us in the comments what city you're watching from today. And if you believe stories like this deserve to be told, hit that subscribe button and help us keep these voices alive. The Virginia State Courthouse was quiet that morning, just like always. November sunlight filtered through the tall windows, drawing golden lines across the wooden benches. Judge Margaret Sullivan was known for her 30 years of experience. Tough, disciplined, and with zero tolerance for nonsense. The case before her that morning seemed routine. A property dispute, a few witnesses, standard procedure. The man sitting quietly at the defendant's table drew no attention. Frank Morrison, 68 years old, with his faded blue jacket and neat clothing, gave the impression of a middle-class retiree. His hair had gone white, his hands trembled slightly, and his face bore the marks of time. He had no lawyer beside him, no family, just the papers in front of him and a glass of water. A few people in the gallery had glanced at him and moved on. Some had thought with pity about an old man coming to court by himself. No one had asked about his military background. No one had wondered why he hadn't hired a lawyer. Because Frank Morrison had managed to be perfectly invisible for 40 years. "Mr. Morrison," said Judge Sullivan, adjusting her glasses, "please take the witness stand." Frank slowly stood up. There was a slight pain in his knees, the memory of old wounds. As he walked toward the witness stand, his steps were determined but unhurried. The reason he moved so slowly wasn't age. It was something he'd learned over 40 years. Never show you're in a hurry. Never reveal your weakness. When he was sworn in, his voice was calm but low. Even the court reporter struggled to hear him. "Please state your name for the record," asked the opposing attorney. "Frank Morrison." "Your occupation?" "Retired." "Retired from what profession?" Frank paused for a moment. His eyes scanned the courtroom. He noticed 2 young officers sitting in the back rows, one in Navy uniform, the other Army. He recognized them from their posture, their haircuts, the alertness in their eyes. Young soldiers. They hadn't seen war yet, but they were trained. "Military personnel," he said finally. "What rank did you retire at?" "Major." This information was true, but it was only 10% of the story. Frank Morrison had officially retired at the rank of major. But official records didn't show the temporary ranks used in classified operations. They didn't reflect missions that never existed, reports that were never written, wars that were never spoken of. The questions continued. Technical details about the real estate dispute, dates, documents. Frank answered each question carefully, but his voice was still too low. Judge Sullivan frowned several times. "Mr. Morrison, please speak up. The court reporter needs to hear every word." "I apologize, Your Honor," said Frank, but he barely raised his voice. The soldiers in the gallery were listening carefully. The young Navy officer, James Chen, had noticed something in Frank's manner of speaking. His word choice, sentence structure, the way he responded to orders. This man wasn't just an old soldier. This was someone who had received command training. "Mr. Morrison," the opposing attorney interrupted, "where exactly did you serve between 1987 and 1995? Frank's eyes hardened. "Classified information." "Nothing is classified in this courtroom, Mr. Morrison. I'm asking where you served." "Various places." "Can you be more specific?" "No." Judge Sullivan leaned forward. "Mr. Morrison, you need to give open and honest testimony in our court. Provide clear answers to the questions." Frank paused for a moment. A movement from the back row caught his attention. An older man had stood up, seeming to leave, but had stopped and was looking at Frank. There was recognition in the man's face. It was Lieutenant General, retired Robert Hayes, but Frank hadn't seen him for 25 years. "Mr. Morrison," Judge Sullivan's voice rose, "I'm warning you. Show respect for this court and speak up." Frank's jaw tightened. For 40 years, he hadn't answered to anyone. No one had asked him to tell his story, because officially, his story didn't exist. But now this woman was sitting across from him, giving him orders, disrespecting him. Judge Sullivan banged her gavel hard. "Final warning, speak up or you'll be held in contempt of court." At that moment, everyone in the courtroom saw the change in Frank's face. The tired, old man expression disappeared. In its place came a cold, deadly determination. His eyes turned to ice, his shoulders straightened, his chin jutted forward. Frank slowly stood up. He leaned into the microphone, and he whispered the 5 words that broke 40 years of silence. Phantom Strike 7 Alpha. The effect was immediate and electric. Lieutenant General Hayes's mouth fell open. Young Officer Chen jerked as if hit by a bullet. Judge Sullivan's gavel slipped from her hand, crashing onto the desk. Every military personnel in the courtroom straightened as if receiving a command. Because Phantom Strike 7 Alpha wasn't just a code name. It was the name of an operation that took place during the 1991 Gulf War and officially never existed. A rescue mission. A night operation that saved 18 captured American soldiers and was completed within 72 hours. The mission was so classified that even the names of the participating soldiers were classified. And now, in this ordinary courtroom, the mission commander was standing. Lieutenant General Hayes slowly stood up. He placed his hand over his heart and gave a perfect military salute. "Colonel Morrison," he said, his voice trembling, "I've wanted to thank you for 30 years. Frank turned toward him. For the first time, a softness appeared in his eyes. "General Hayes, how is your son?" "He's well, sir. Completed his 4th tour in Afghanistan. He remembers every day that we owe you." There was complete silence in the courtroom. No one dared to breathe. Judge Sullivan's face had turned bright red. I didn't know." Frank turned to her. There was no anger in his eyes, just deep sadness. "Of course you didn't know," he said calmly. "Because that's how we were taught. Stay quiet. Don't be proud. Don't tell your stories. Just do your job and be forgotten." The court reporter was trying to take notes with trembling hands. "For 30 years, no one asked me what I did," Frank continued. "No one asked about that night, those 18 kids, the 2 men we lost rescuing them. Because officially, none of it happened." Frank moved closer to the microphone. This time his voice was loud enough for everyone to hear. "February 7th, 1991, a secret facility in northwestern Iraq. 18 American pilots captured. Intelligence reports said they would be moved to another location within 48 hours. It was our last chance for rescue." The room held its breath. 12-man team, night operation, no air support, unclear escape plan. We couldn't be captured because we weren't supposed to be there. Young Officer Chen had leaned forward, trying not to miss a word. "We entered the facility, found the 18 prisoners, but we were trapped. They knew we were coming. The exit route was cut off." Frank paused for a moment. Memories were flooding back. "I had 2 choices, surrender or fight. If we surrendered, everyone would die. If we fought, maybe some of us would survive." Sergeant Williams and Corporal Jackson volunteered, distraction duty. While they drew the enemy's attention, I would get the 18 prisoners out. Frank's voice trembled. Williams's last radio message was, "Tell 7 Alpha to drink a beer for us when he gets home." I never saw them again. Lieutenant General Hayes had tears in his eyes. 72 hours later, we were all safe. 18 pilots returned to their families, but Williams and Jackson's bodies were never found. According to official records, they never existed. Frank pulled 2 old worn dog tags from his pocket. "I've carried these for 30 years, Williams and Jackson's, because no one else remembers them." Judge Sullivan slowly stood up. There was deep shame on her face. "Colonel Morrison, I apologize. I could never have known." Frank looked at her. "You didn't need to know, Your Honor. I didn't wait 30 years to come to a courtroom. I just expected to be shown respect." Crying could be heard in the courtroom. Young officers were standing. Even civilian observers had risen. "What does this have to do with the real estate case?" asked the opposing attorney, still in shock. Frank turned to him. "Nothing. But you asked me where I came from 30 years ago. That's where I came from the friends I left there." Judge Sullivan picked up her gavel but didn't strike it. "This court," she said, her voice trembling, "respectfully acknowledges the service of Colonel Frank Morrison, and I personally offer my thanks, though it's 30 years late." Everyone in the courtroom began standing and applauding, but Frank raised his hand to stop the applause. "I don't want applause," he said. "I want a minute of silence for Williams and Jackson." And in that courtroom, a moment of silence was held for 2 heroes who officially never existed. For 60 seconds, no one moved. No one made a sound. After the moment of silence ended, young Officer Chen stepped forward. "Colonel Morrison, sir," he said respectfully. "My father was also in the Gulf War. A pilot. He was captured." Frank's eyes widened. "Was his name James Chen?" "Yes, sir." Frank smiled. The first real smile in 30 years. "He was one of those kids. We rescued him." Chen's eyes filled with tears. "Sir, I've wanted to thank you my whole life. Don't thank me, son. Just be a good soldier, for the memory of Williams and Jackson." The court was postponed that day. The real estate case had suddenly become unimportant. What mattered was the recognition of a forgotten hero. Lieutenant General Hayes approached Frank. "Colonel, we want to organize a ceremony at the Pentagon for Williams and Jackson." Frank shook his head. "No, General. They died in a classified operation. They should remain classified, but people should know about them." "No," Frank said firmly. "Some heroes should stay silent. That's what they wanted." That evening, Frank was sitting in a local bar. Alone, as always. Lieutenant General Hayes came in and sat beside him. "I should have found you 30 years ago," Hayes said. "You couldn't have," Frank replied. "I wanted to be lost." "Why?" Frank took a sip of beer. "Because I think about them every day. Williams and Jackson. They died. I lived. That's not fair." Hayes touched Frank's shoulder. "You lived because you had to save 18 people. And today, 30 years later, those 18 people's children are free. That's their legacy." The following week, young officers began coming to Frank's house. Chen had brought his friends. They all wanted to ask questions, to hear stories. Frank was reluctant at first, but then he realized these young people weren't just curious. They wanted to learn how to be brave, how to lead, how to sacrifice. "I'll teach you something," Frank told them. "Heroism isn't about wearing medals. It's not about passing tests. Heroism is about risking your life for your friends." Months passed. Frank wasn't so alone anymore. Young soldiers visited him. Lieutenant General Hayes met with him regularly. Even Judge Sullivan had sent an apology letter. But most importantly, Frank could now talk about Williams and Jackson. He shared their stories. He kept them alive. "Do you ever regret anything?" Chen had asked one day. Frank had thought for a long time. "My only regret," he had said finally, "is staying silent for 30 years. Williams and Jackson should have been remembered much earlier." Frank Morrison never became famous. No documentary was made about him. No book was written. But the 5 words he spoke in that courtroom changed the lives of hundreds of young soldiers. Because sometimes the most powerful stories don't shout. They wait. And at the right moment, they're shared with the right person. And Williams and Jackson, they're not forgotten anymore. Every year, in that little bar, Frank and his friends drink a beer for them. They commemorate their heroism. They remember their sacrifice. Because some names never appear in records, but they're never forgotten either. So have you ever known someone like Frank Morrison? Someone who didn't tell their story but made great sacrifices? Write their name in the comments. Share their story. Because at Hidden Hero Stories, we believe that the most powerful stories don't shout, they wait. If this story touched you, subscribe, share, and help keep these voices alive. We'll see you in the next one. And until then, if you ever encounter someone serving silently, remember to show them respect. History might be sitting right beside you.